Welcome to a tale of cruel irony. We are tracking the life and final moments of Chewangnima, a titan of the mountains who stood atop Mount Everest 19 separate times. But death didn't come for him on the highest peak. It waited for him on a routine workday. He traded a shot at a world record to honor a promise to the people he guided, a selfless decision that ultimately walked him straight into a fatal trap on the slopes of Mount Barunsi. How does a legend simply evaporate? They called him the Smiling Sherpa, a survivor who treated the death zone on the roof of the world like his own backyard. Yet at 7,000 meters, he vanished into thin air without leaving a footprint. This isn't just a climbing disaster. It is a brutal reminder that the mountains always demand the highest price, even from the masters who do everything by the book. To truly grasp the weight of what was lost, we must rewind to the genesis of his journey. We need to go to a place where oxygen is a luxury and every single inhale is a battle for survival. In this unforgiving realm, where the sky feels heavy enough to crush your spine, a boy named Chewangnima entered the world around 1967. His playground was the Khumbu, a rugged, unforgiving stretch of land dwelling in the shadows of the Earth's tallest giants. Born into a lineage of impoverished Sherpas, he was raised on a single brutal truth, passed down through the ages. The mountain is a generous god, but it is also a thief that takes whenever it pleases. While other children sat at desks with heavy textbooks, Chewang's classroom was the vertical world. His lessons were carved into granite and whispered by the freezing winds. From the moment he could walk, he understood the meaning of labor. We aren't talking about office fatigue or factory shifts. We are talking about the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that threatens to shatter the human spirit. He spent his adolescence crushed under the weight of strangers' ambitions. While wealthy foreign climbers hiked with light packs, inhaling the freedom of the hills, Chewang hauled equipment that often weighed more than his own body. Every single vertical step was a declaration of war against gravity, against the thinning air, and against his own physical limits. Most would snap under that unimaginable pressure, but Chewangnima did not break. Instead, the hardship forged him. It reconstructed his biology on a cellular level. His lungs adapted to snatch oxygen from the void, and his muscles hardened into a steel-like endurance that defied medical science. He naturally developed the kind of high-altitude physiology that Westerners spend fortunes and months of agonizing training to simulate. But for Chewang, this wasn't recreational. In a landscape devoid of opportunity, the mountains offered the only ladder out of poverty. It was his singular ticket to a future. By the dawn of the 1990s, Chewang had evolved beyond the role of a straggler carrying bags. He had become a living extension of the Himalayas. He memorized every contour of the rock and anticipated every mood swing of the weather. His body was no longer just flesh and blood. It was a precision instrument tempered in the freezing atmosphere. It wasn't long before that human instrument faced a trial beyond imagination. The early 1990s brought a gold rush to mountaineering, new names, advanced gear, and dangerous egos. Chewangnima stepped into this chaotic arena as if he were crossing a fragile snow bridge ready to make his mark. He graduated from hauling loads to base camp to the elite rank of high-altitude porter. This wasn't just a job title change, but it was an entry into a different dimension. Up in the clouds, you cease to be a simple carrier of goods. You become the insurance policy, the lifeline, and the final prayer for clients who have paid thousands to stand on the roof of the world. One slip here bankrupts your life. In the autumn of 1994, his name graced the roster of a British expedition led by Henry Todd. Their target was Everest via the classic South Col, but anyone will tell you that classic implies safety, and the mountains offer none. Every climb is an unwritten screenplay directed by ice and gale force winds. His mission was to navigate the Khumbu Icefall, a terrifying maze of shifting ice towers the size of apartment buildings. While the client saw an adventure and a challenge, Chewang hauled oxygen ropes and rations. To him, this was labor. It was grueling and relentless, but it was the only trade he knew. He watched silently as the mountain broke the foreigners, draining the vigor from strong men until they were helpless children. Yet he simply breathed. He simply kept walking. His physique, sculpted by a lifetime of toil, operated like a perpetual motion machine, ignoring the screaming altitude. He saw terror in the eyes of the others, but his own gaze held only icy focus. Then came October 10th, 1994. At 27 years old, his moment arrived. He stood atop the planet on the peak of Everest, hovering near 9,000 meters, a cruising altitude for commercial jets. The wind howled, attempting to sweep him into the abyss, but he held his ground. In that split second, Chewang shed the title of porter. He was a conqueror. From that godlike vantage point, his previous life in the Khumbu villages looked like insignificant specks on an endless canvas. But coming down was merely the prologue to his true rise. Word of his triumph raced through the climbing fraternity faster than a falling Sirac. He didn't just return to base camp. He returned, carrying a heavy reputation. He was known as unbreakable, reliable, and virtually immune to the sickness of high altitude. The days of hunting for gigs were over. Now the work hunted him. By 1995, Chewang locked in a long-term alliance with a powerhouse agency, Sherpa Shangri-La Treks. This ignited a 16-year odyssey that would cement him as one of the most desired high-altitude guides in the Himalayas. He transitioned from the help to the head of the pack. Soon the entire mountaineering world would witness exactly what Chewang Nima could do when the mountain decided to bare its fangs. He stepped out of the background and began casting a shadow of his own. Chewang became a Sardar, a title uttered with deep reverence in Sherpa culture. A Sardar is not just a boss. He is the expedition's brain, its grand strategist, and its cold-blooded calculator. He bears the burden of selecting the path through the deadliest sectors, overseeing the rope fixing and holding the life of every client and Sherpa in his hands. He stares down the treacherous icefall and dictates where the line between life and death is drawn. He interprets the storm warnings in the cloud formations and judges the ferocity of the wind against the slopes. The entire operation rests on his shoulders, a weight far crushing than any physical pack he ever carried. But with that crushing pressure came a new level of financial reward. Chewang began pulling in 5, sometimes 6 times his previous wages. For a man born in a destitute Khumbu village, these numbers were astronomical. Back home, his wife Lamu Chiki continued to manage her modest tea shop. The aroma of spices and hot tea represented the scent of stability, an anchor keeping the family grounded, while the patriarch walked among the clouds. Yet the engine driving their prosperity was his dangerous work on the peaks. Every departure for the season brought months of agonizing dread for her, but it also secured their tomorrow. Chewang knew exactly how to invest his earnings. He was determined to give his children the one thing he never possessed a choice. He sent his 2 sons to a prestigious private school in Kathmandu. Every step he took in the hypoxic death zone purchased a day of safety in a classroom hundreds of kilometers away. He climbed the vertical world so his sons could walk on flat, safe ground, and he kept climbing. Everest transformed from a mythical beast into a workplace. It became so routine that he sometimes summited twice in a single season. Let that sink in. Twice in a few weeks he navigated from base camp to the apex of the planet and back. It is a physical and mental marathon that pushes human biology to the brink. Yet he clocked in and out like it was a factory shift. Through all the accolades, he remained a pragmatist. He wasn't interested in the ego of clean ascents without support. His mandate was the survival of his clients and himself, which is why he religiously utilized bottled oxygen. To him, oxygen was a professional tool, ensuring he remained sharp, powerful, and capable of making critical choices when a single error meant death. By 2008, his logbook boasted a staggering statistic: over 15 successful Everest summits. He had transcended the rank of a typical Sherpa. He was a living institution. His presence at base camp was a seal of quality and safety. In an environment where drawing a breath feels like a victory, a smile is often seen as a sign of madness. Yet that expression became Chewang Nima's trademark. The professional climbing circuit dubbed him the Smiling Sherpa. Clients who paid fortunes for a shot at glory returned with unbelievable tales. They spoke of a man who beamed with joy even at 8,000 meters, in the death zone where lungs burn and brains swell. From the lack of air, he would simply look at them and grin. That smile wasn't just a facial tic, it was a tactical signal. It told them he had total command of the situation, that he could navigate the darkness. In that high-altitude hellscape, his calm demeanor revitalized exhausted climbers more effectively than any pep talk. It acted as an emotional anchor in a hurricane of fear, dragging them back from the edge of panic. This unshakable composure was the bedrock of his legend, cementing his status as one of the most technically gifted guides of his era. The name Chewang Nima unlocked doors at the world's most elite expedition firms. He began guiding for giants like Alpine Ascents International, a U.S.-based outfit known for hiring only the absolute cream of the crop. His professionalism wasn't just known, it was revered. A defining chapter of his career was his collaboration with his cousin, Lakparita, another titan of the peaks. They stood together on the summit of Everest 8 separate times. This was far more than a workplace partnership. It was a sacred bond. 2 men linked by bloodline and climbing rope entrusted their lives to one another in the planet's most hostile conditions without speaking a word. Their teamwork set the gold standard for precision and trust at altitude. Yet despite his immense authority, he never ruled with an iron fist. Everest Base Camp is usually a cauldron of toxic egos and frayed nerves. High-altitude base camps are a chaotic melting pot of adrenaline and ego places, where climbers from every corner of the globe converge and tempers often flare over the slightest provocation. Yet in this volatile environment, Chewang stood out as a beacon of calm. He was legendary not just for his climbing prowess, but for his peacemaking abilities, possessing an uncanny knack for extinguishing heated disputes before they could explode into violence. You would almost never hear him shout. Instead, he dismantled conflicts with a soft-spoken wisdom and a smile that could disarm the most aggressive ego in the room. He was living proof that in an environment ruled by brute strength and endurance, the ultimate power was actually serenity. The international climbing community took note, recognizing that his spirit was just as formidable as his physical stamina. By the year 2010, his fame had transcended the tight-knit circle of mountaineers. Chewang Nima was selected as the official face and brand ambassador for Sherpa adventure gear. Suddenly, his warm expression was no longer just his own. It became the visual identity for an entire nation of climbers, representing the resilience, the trustworthiness, and the sacred bond that the Sherpa people share with the highest peaks on Earth. However, those who looked past the marketing and the gentle demeanor found something far more intense. Beneath the surface lay a mind capable of cold mathematical risk assessment. Chewang Nima operated by a strict, unbreakable code, a set of personal laws carved into his psyche by years of surviving the death zone. His philosophy was simple but non-negotiable tagging. The summit is a luxury, but getting back down alive is a requirement. He understood that a client's summit fever, that blinding, obsessive drive to prove their worth to the world, was the most dangerous thing on the mountain. When the winds picked up, ambition had to be strangled immediately. Chewang possessed the authority to halt an expedition a mere 100 meters from the top if he sensed a shift in the barometric pressure or saw a client wobbling from exhaustion. He knew the harsh truth: the mountain will always be there next season, but a human body left in the snow is gone forever. This wasn't just a catchy slogan for him, it was the way he lived and worked. There is a story that defines his legacy. High on the slopes of Everest in the thin air where the brain begins to die, Chewang and his brother Lakpa spotted a shape in the snow. It was Usha Bista, a climber from Nepal, collapsed, disoriented and fading fast. She was essentially a ghost in the making, unable to move another step. In the death zone, the unwritten rule is often every climber for themselves. Most people are barely keeping themselves alive and will walk right past a dying stranger to save their own energy. But Chewang and his brother were different. They immediately scrapped their own summit bid. They sacrificed their limited oxygen supplies, their warmth, and their critical time to orchestrate a grueling rescue, inching her down the mountain to an altitude where life was possible. They gambled with their own survival to ensure she didn't become another frozen landmark on the route. They succeeded, and she lived. Yet reliance on raw strength and gut instinct wasn't enough for a professional like Chewang. He recognized a terrifying trend: the weather patterns were becoming erratic, and the wealthy clients paying to climb were arriving less prepared than ever before. This realization drove him to do something unusual during the off-season. While his peers retreated to their mountain villages to recover, he boarded a plane and flew to the United States. He swapped his ice axe for a notebook, attending courses to master the latest protocols in high-altitude medicine, avalanche survival, and technical rescue operations. He became a student again because he was haunted by what he had witnessed. The mountains had shown him their cruelty too many times. He had watched friends, powerful legendary Sherpas, walk into the mist and never walk out. He treated every one of those losses as a harsh curriculum, a lesson he was morally obligated to memorize. When speaking to his family, he summarized his worldview in a single powerful sentence: "I have no use for glory. My only job is to bring people home." To him, the Himalayas were not a stage for heroics or a podium for medals. They were simply his office, a beautiful, lethal, and unpredictable workplace that demanded total respect. Consequently, he went to extreme lengths to mitigate the dangers for his teams. He was always the point man, the first to step onto the treacherous glaciers, probing the snow bridges that spanned bottomless crevasses to ensure they would hold. He packed redundant gear and extra oxygen bottles, treating every climb as if a disaster were inevitable. He acted as a human buffer between the fury of the elements and the dreams of his clients, taking the hardest hits so they could touch the sky and return to their families. Fast forward to the spring of 2010. The atmosphere at Everest Base Camp was vibrating with energy. The season was peaking, and Chewongnima was back in charge, serving as the Sirdar, the head Sherpa for a major expedition with Alpine Ascents International. He was guiding yet another team toward the roof of the world. The logistics were flawless. The fixed lines were solid. The clients had adapted well to the altitude, and the weather gods were granting them a narrow opportunity to push for the top. Once again, Chewang did exactly what he was paid to do. He stood on the summit of Mount Everest for the 19th time. 19 successful ascents. It is a number that is hard to comprehend for anyone who hasn't felt the air thin out at 8,000 meters. At that moment, he became only the second human being in history to reach that milestone, and the mountaineering community watched in awe. Standing at the pinnacle of this sport, there was only one man ahead of him, the legendary Sherpa, who held the record with 20 summits. Chewang was now breathing down his neck, just one climb away from tying the world record. And the crazy part, he had the ability to do it right then and there. The weather window was holding steady. Physically, he was a machine perfectly acclimatized to the environment. He could have easily dropped down to Camp 4, slept for 48 hours, and guided a second rotation of climbers back up. It would have been effortless. The base camp rumor mill was already spinning. Reporters were drafting their stories. 20 summits. The record is tied. It was the kind of feat that would permanently etch his name in the history books in gold lettering. He was on the verge of becoming a living deity of the mountains and equal to the great Appa. The world waited for him to seize the moment. But Chewongnima looked at the opportunity and did something that shocked everyone. He walked away. He rejected the record. He ignored the potential fame and the flashing cameras. Why? Because he had a prior engagement. There was another team of climbers waiting for him, a group with less experience that he had promised to lead up Mount Barunsa, a neighboring peak that, while lower, was technically vicious. They were depending on him. His word was his bond. To Chewang, a handshake agreement with clients who had placed their lives in his hands was infinitely more valuable than a trophy or a statistic. He made a choice that confused the glory hunters but made perfect sense to those who understood his code. Obligation outweighs ambition. He placed the safety of others and his own sense of responsibility above his personal triumph. He descended from Everest fully aware that he was letting a historic opportunity dissolve into the wind. But he was at peace. He told his friends, "I'll get the record next year." In the spring of 2011, he believed the mountain would wait for him. The mountain might have been patient, but the rest of the world was moving at breakneck speed. By the autumn of 2010, Chewang was back in the United States. This time, he wasn't sitting in a classroom. He was the guest of honor, celebrated at high-profile galas for the American Himalayan Foundation. He was the ultimate success story, a man who had risen from carrying heavy loads as a porter to becoming a global icon of mountaineering. His family members who had immigrated to the States years prior watched him with a complicated mix of admiration and terror. They knew the physical toll of his work and the razor-thin margin between life and death he walked every season. They begged him to stop. "Stay here," they urged him. "Just take a few months off. Relax. You've done enough." They tried to sell him on the American dream, a life of safety stability, an air rich with oxygen far removed from the crushing avalanches. To sweeten the deal, there was a massive incentive for him to remain in the country. An invitation arrived for an exclusive reception featuring the former Vice President Al Gore. Picture this, a man born in a stone hut with no electricity was being asked to shake hands with one of the most powerful political figures on Earth. It was the pinnacle of social recognition, a once-in-a-lifetime event that most people would kill to attend. For 99% of people, the choice would be automatic, but Chewongnima operated on a different frequency. He politely declined the invitation. He explained that he couldn't stay in America because he had work to do in Nepal. Clients were waiting. He packed his bags and rushed back for the start of the autumn climbing season. It was all about the paycheck. He needed to earn money for his son's tuition to secure a future for his family that didn't involve carrying loads up a mountain. He looked at his worried relatives in the U.S. and, flashing that famous, reassuring smile, promised, "I will be back. Next year. We will have plenty of time then." With that, he flew away, trading the warmth of a VIP reception for the freezing gales of the Himalayas. Once again, he prioritized his duty over his ego. He chose the grind of responsibility over the ease of comfort. He had no way of knowing that this specific choice, this dedication to his word and his work, was funneling him toward a destiny he couldn't escape. All roads were leading to the slopes of Mount Barunsa. It was the very same mountain he had chosen over his Everest world record just months earlier. It felt as though fate had positioned every piece on the chessboard and was simply waiting for him to make the final blunder. the destination Barunsi standing 7,129 meters tall. On paper, it is not as monstrous as Everest, but in the Himalayas, underestimating a peak is usually a fatal error. For this trip, Chewang wasn't leading a major expedition as a sirdar. He was working as a freelancer, a hired gun. His mission seemed almost insulting for a man of his status: fix the safety ropes on the crux of the route for an international team. A motley crew of British, American, and Iranian mountaineers were huddled in base camp, waiting for him to pave the road to the summit. The fee for this dangerous work, $1,000. Just $1,000. For a superstar of the climbing world, it was peanuts, a symbolic sum. But for Chewang, a job was a job, and he approached it with his usual professionalism. However, the autumn of 2010 was cursed. From the moment the season began, it felt like the sky had broken open. Snow fell relentlessly day after day, burying the region. The entire Himalayan range was choking under abnormally heavy snow accumulation. Veteran climbers were spooked. Even over on Everest, where the infrastructure is massive, expeditions were packing up and going home. The conditions were simply suicidal. Massive slabs of unstable snow hung over the climbing routes like guillotines waiting to drop. Yet over on Barunsa, isolated from the main commercial hubs, the group remained. They were waiting. Their ace in the hole was Chewang Nima. If he was there, surely they could make it. But the mountain's flanks were now draped in a thick, deceiving layer of fresh powder. That beautiful white blanket was a trap. It concealed the treacherous ice, the hidden ravines, and the loose rock. Every step upward was a game of Russian roulette, but the clock was ticking. The clients had paid their fees, their vacation days were burning away, and down in the valley, the pressure to climb was reaching a boiling point. Every single wasted second bleeds the expedition dry, both financially and emotionally. The timeline isn't just tight, it's suffocating. The pressure is nearing a breaking point. Chewang understands the weight on his shoulders. He has to blaze the trail now. Or the entire group's summit bid fails before it even starts. The terrain ahead is the death zone of the route, a ridge honed by the wind until it is sharp enough to split the sky. Look to the left, and you stare into an infinite void. Look to the right, and it's the same terrifying story, and the ground beneath your boots. It's a ticking time bomb of shifting powder waiting to slide and bury you. Chewang understands this lethal geometry better than any human alive, yet the clients down at base camp are counting on him. Duty calls louder than fear, so he pushes upward into the kill zone. The calendar reads October 23rd, 2010. He isn't facing this monster solo. He's tethered to Nima Gyaltsen, a young powerhouse of a Sherpa. Together, they are the tip of the spear, the elite advanced team. While they battle the mountain, the paying clients and the rest of the crew sit tight in the relative comfort of the lower camps, sipping tea and waiting for the green light. Now it's just two men against the fury of the Himalayas. Their mission is brutal, but simple: tag the top and secure the safety lines through the deadliest sectors. If they fail, nobody climbs tomorrow. The weather is absolutely savage, trying to scrub them off the face of the mountain, yet they move with a terrifying efficiency, tearing up the slope at a pace that defies logic. They are wading through snow that acts like quicksand, waist-high and heavy. The wind screams, blasting millions of ice needles directly into their exposed skin. But they don't stop. It's a rhythmic trance kick. A step, gasp for air, repeat. It's a grueling misery they've mastered over a lifetime. By 2 p.m, the summit is tantalizingly close. Their instruments show 7,045 meters. The peak is right there, just a stone's throw away. It feels like one last burst of energy will seal the deal. But at this altitude, the clock is a murderer. 2 p.m. is the witching hour in high mountaineering, the absolute latest you should be moving up. Any later, and you are flirting with disaster. The sun begins its retreat, casting long skeletal shadows across the snow. Soon the temperature will plummet, plunging the mountain into a deep freeze. The window for a safe return is slamming shut. An invisible countdown begins ticking in their heads, a psychological pressure cooker that has broken stronger men than these. It's the ultimate gamble, bail out now with the prize in sight, or sprint for the finish and race the darkness down. They choose to push, but the body is rebelling. After hours of crushing exertion, the lack of oxygen hypoxia starts to eat away at their faculties. It's not just tiredness, it's a systematic shutdown of the biological machine. The thin air dulls your survival instincts and makes your reflexes sluggish as molasses. Even a legend like Chewang isn't immune. His brain is firing on half its cylinders, struggling to process simple tasks. Recognizing the fatigue, young Nima Gyaltsen steps up. He's fresher, hungrier, and he takes the point position to break the trail. Nima acts as a human plow, carving a trench through the drifts along that knife-edge spine. Chiwang trails behind, managing the safety line. It's textbook mountaineering protocol, standard operating procedure for a two-man rope team. But fate hangs on tiny details. The specific order of their march, who is leading and who is following, is about to become the difference between life and death. They step out onto the exposed ridge line. Nima is out front with Chiwang guarding the rear. These are the final agonizing meters to glory, but also the most treacherous. Suddenly, Chiwang halts. He needs to drive in a snow pick at a metal stake to anchor the rope and protect the team. He scans the ground and raises his ice axe. He has performed this motion 1,000 times in his sleep. It's muscle memory. It's art. But the mountain has set a booby trap. Beneath the pristine, inviting surface of the snow lies a lie. He thinks he's standing on solid ground, but he isn't. He is standing on a white illusion hiding a deadly secret. It's a cornice, a fragile overhanging lip of wind-blown snow suspended over a sheer drop. To the naked eye, it looks like part of the mountain's shoulder. In reality, it's a structure held together by nothing but surface tension and luck. As he swings his tool, or perhaps just shifts his boot, the structural integrity fails. That tiny motion triggers a catastrophe. A sharp, dry crack detonates like a gunshot in the silent, thin air. A spiderweb fracture races across the surface, and instantly gravity takes over. The ground doesn't just crumble, it evaporates. A massive slab of hardened snow, arguably the size of a city bus, shears cleanly off the mountain face. The entire platform Chiwang occupies simply drops into the void. It happens faster than a blink, too fast for panic, too fast for a scream. Up ahead, Nima Gyaltsen feels a violent jerk on his harness, followed by a sickening sensation of weightlessness. The tension on the rope vanishes instantly. He spins around, hard hammering. Where his mentor stood a heartbeat ago, there is nothing but open sky and a swirling cloud of powder. This is the moment where the safety systems are supposed to save the day. The rope is designed to catch the fall to arrest the slide. But physics is cruel. The massive blocks of ice and compacted snow falling alongside Chiwang act like a falling guillotine blade. They smash into the taut rope with unstoppable kinetic energy. Snap. The line is severed with a crack that rivals thunder. Nima is left stranded on the ridge, staring helplessly into the white mist where his friend just vanished. The smiling Sherpa, a titan of the climbing world with 19 Everest summits to his name, is gone, erased by the mountain. Then comes the silence. It's a heavy, ringing quiet that screams of death. Nima Gyaltsen is the loneliest man on earth, shivering on a precipice at 7,000 meters. Paralysis sets in. He screams Chiwang Sok until his throat burns, but the gale tears the sound from his lips and scatters it. He crawls to the edge, straining his eyes to find a speck of color, a wave, anything. But below him is just a chaotic tumble of debris plunging thousands of meters into the shadows. Deep down, he knows it's over. Surviving that fall is impossible. Summoning every ounce of willpower, he begins the nightmare descent solo. Every step is physical and emotional torture. The replay of the ground breaking away loops in his mind like a horror movie. Somehow he navigates back to the high camp. When he arrives, he is a broken man. He is weeping uncontrollably, his face contorted with shock. Melissa Arnott, an American client, steps out to greet him. She counts only one figure returning through the mist. Unaware of the disaster, she assumes the other is just lagging behind, tired from a job well done. She approaches with a warm smile and a thermos of hot tea, ready to celebrate their progress. Seeing his devastation, she pauses. "Where is he?" she asks, scanning the slope behind him. "Where is Chiwang?" Through gasping sobs, Nima chokes out the words that no climber ever wants to hear. The blood drains from Melissa's face. The thermos nearly slips from her gloved hands. The reality of the tragedy hits the camp with the force of an avalanche. But Arnott is a pro. She shoves her emotions aside and instantly shifts into crisis management mode. She grabs the radio handset broadcasting a Mayday call to base camp. She demands a chopper, a rescue team, anything that can fly or climb. But the mountain has already made its decision. The wind is howling, whipping up a gale, and fresh snow is starting to bury the tracks. Worst of all, the sun is gone. In these hostile conditions, rotored aircraft are grounded. No human rescue squad can reach that altitude in the dark. The grim truth settles, and any help is hours away, and by then it will be meaningless. The operation is paused until first light. The camp settles into a suffocating silence, contemplating the cruelty of the situation. The man who spent decades securing the path for others had fallen while doing exactly that, protecting the route. Chiwang Nima was a giant, a king of the Himalayas. Yet the mountain that claimed him wasn't the savage Everest, but a technically easier peak during a task he could do with his eyes closed. It felt absurd, like a Formula One champion dying in a fender bender at a grocery store. It served as a brutal reminder: you never truly conquer a mountain. You only negotiate a temporary passage. If the mountain decides your visa has expired, there is no appeal process. Today, Chewang's time had simply run out. When the sun finally rose, it brought a cruel glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had arrested his fall on a lower ledge. Maybe he was alive, injured, and waiting. Motivated by desperate optimism, a team of strong Sherpas gears up for a perilous ground search. They battle their way down toward the impact zone, but the mountain fights back. The snow is waist-deep and unstable. The rescuers are sinking up to their chests with every step. It's a suicide mission. The slope is primed to slide again, and the risk of triggering a massive secondary avalanche is off the charts. After hours of punishing labor with zero progress, they are forced to retreat. The ground rescue is a bust. Meanwhile, the devastating news hits Kathmandu. Chewang's cousin, Lakparita, refuses to accept the verdict. He scrambles, chartering a private helicopter and racing toward Varanasi, clinging to a thread of possibility. Their plan is to scour the face from the sky, but the mountain seems determined to keep its secrets. As they approach the massif, they hit a wall of violent air. The turbulence is catastrophic, tossing the helicopter around like a leaf in a hurricane. The pilot fights the controls, risking the entire crew, but the mountain rejects them. They have to abort. It isn't until October 25th, 2 full days after the fall, that the cavalry arrives. Simone Moro, a legendary climber and perhaps the most skilled high-altitude pilot in the world, steps into the cockpit. Simone reads these peaks like a book. He initiates a surgical, grid-pattern search from the air. He doesn't just do a flyby, he commits. For 6 grueling hours, he hunts for a ghost. He pushes the machine to its limit, hovering dangerously close to the ice walls, his rotors slicing the thin air just feet from the granite. He scans every fissure, every shadow, every overhang. But it's hopeless. The accident site has been completely scrubbed clean by fresh avalanches. Hundreds of tons of ice and snow have plastered the mountainside, creating a massive white tomb. There is no orange suit, no gear, no disturbance in the snow. Nothing remains. Finally, Simone keys the mic, his voice heavy with resignation. It's gone. He's buried deep. There's absolutely no chance. The mission is scrubbed. To keep looking is to gamble more lives for a body that will never be found. The official paperwork is filed with the chilling, bureaucratic stamp, presumed dead, missing. And just like that, the book closes on one of the greatest mountaineers in history. For the family left behind, this isn't just a sudden loss, it is a nightmare from which they cannot wake. There is no body to bring home, no casket to lower into the earth, and no headstone to visit for comfort. The mountain simply swallowed him whole, denying them even the closure of a final farewell. News of the catastrophe didn't just spread, it detonated across the globe, rolling down from the high peaks like an unstoppable avalanche. Major international publications immediately splashed the tragedy across their front pages. Nigerian iconic Sherpa vanishes, and Himalayan titan lost to the snow. Chewang Nima, a name that was once whispered with reverence only in specialized climbing journals, was suddenly trending on screens worldwide. The internet became a digital vigil flooded with tributes. Dozens, and then hundreds of climbers he had shepherded to the top of the world poured their grief into public posts. "I am alive today. Because of him, one survivor wrote about a near-death experience on Lhasa. Another shared, at 8,000 meters, when I wanted to give up, his grin was the only oxygen I needed." The climbing community was hit with a heavy realization we hadn't just lost a record holder. We had lost the silent guardian of an entire generation of mountaineers. A memorial service in Kathmandu turned into a sea of solemn faces. It was a rare gathering where heavyweights like Reinhold Messner stood shoulder to shoulder with local porters, government ministers and foreign diplomats all united in grief. It was a massive tribute to Chewang's legacy. Yet beneath the speeches, the scent of incense, and the grand obituaries, a cold and jagged reality lay exposed. While the world mourned a hero, his widow and children faced immediate destitution. The insurance payout arrived with a sickening finality, approximately $5,000, just $5,000. That was the price tag placed on the life of a man who had conquered the summit of Everest 19 separate times. Although friends and the global fraternity scrambled to pass the hat collecting donations for his survivors, no stack of cash could ever fill the void of the empty chair at their dinner table. Chewang's wages were the engine that propelled his family toward a modern life, fueling his children's education and their hopes for a future off the slopes. Now that engine had ground to a devastating halt. His disappearance struck like a thunderclap, exposing the terrifying lack of a safety net for the Sherpa community. These men are the spine of every Himalayan expedition. They dance with death, daily securing ropes and hauling heavy supplies so that foreign clients can chase their dreams. Yet when the mountain demands a sacrifice, it is the Sherpa family that is often left to navigate the wreckage of grief and financial ruin entirely alone. Gazing up at the unforgiving white peaks, his peers murmur with a heartbreaking mix of honor and sorrow. He lived for the mountains, and he died for the mountains. It is a poetic sentiment, but that beautiful phrase offers zero comfort to the agonizing question now haunting his home. How do you find the will to survive when the very thing that fed you decides to swallow your whole world in a heartbeat? The slopes offered no answers and no evidence. The mountain does not return what it steals. Search parties scoured the route later, eyes straining against the blinding white, but the result was hauntingly empty. Not a stray glove, not a fractured ice axe, not even a shred of rope. It was as if the Himalayas had simply opened up and erased Chewang Nima from existence, scrubbing his footprints from the earth. Physically, nothing remained. But memories are harder to bury. His narrative has transformed into modern folklore, dissected in documentaries and magazine features across the planet. It stands as a gut-wrenching testament to duty. The community still talks about the spring of 2010, where he made the ultimate choice, abandoning a guaranteed world record to fulfill a promise to another expedition. Ironically, he was fixing ropes for that very same outfit on the day he vanished. That decision to prioritize professional honor over personal glory became a fatal act of loyalty. Yet history shows that systemic change often requires a martyr. His loss was the spark that the industry desperately needed. Asian Trekking, the major company he worked for, was rattled by the catastrophe and the pathetic compensation the legend's family received. In response, they established a dedicated relief fund to support the families of fallen high-altitude workers. It was a drop in the bucket compared to the need, but it was a crucial first step toward justice. It was a public admission that the people behind the records, the invisible hands lifting climbers to the sky, could not be discarded like used gear. Chewang's fate served as a dark prophecy, a canary dying in the coal mine of the death zone, signaling that the status quo was unsustainable. It was a screaming warning that the peaks were becoming more volatile and the hazards for the trailbreakers were spiking off the charts. Tragically, that warning was largely ignored until it was too late to stop an even bigger disaster. 4 years down the line, in the spring of 2014, the prophecy came true in the worst way imaginable. The Khumbu icefall collapsed, crushing 16 Sherpas in an instant and forcing a total overhaul of the industry. But up in the thin air where logic fades, a new myth took root. In the tea houses and base camps, a legend began to circulate in hushed tones. They say the spirit of the smiling Sherpa never really left the Himalayas. Believers claim he patrols the high ridges, an eternal sentry standing between climbers and the abyss. His legendary smile has morphed into a spiritual shield against the storm. This is how his people choose to remember him, not as a victim of the ice, but as its master and guardian. To the rest of the world, he remains the gold standard of mountaineering, a man of immense skill and composure who fell prey to the cruelest joke of nature. He calculated every variable except one. The one factor that defies all math and preparation, dumb blind luck. We want to hear your take on this. Do you believe Chewang made the right call by sacrificing his record attempt? To help his clients, drop your thoughts in the comments below.